Welcome to the Getting Started video for question 9 of ants. In this question, you're going to be implementing the tank ant. Recall from the previous question, question 8, that we implemented the bodyguard ant, which provides defense for ants. But the tank ant is a little better than the bodyguard ant because it also provides some offense. So just like the bodyguard ant, the tank ant is also a container ant. And so it's going to protect an ant that it has in its place. So it kind of wraps around an ant in its place. And it also deals 1 damage to all the bees in its place each turn. So just like any other container ant, it should have that same behavior. It's going to allow the ant it contains to perform its action. So just like with problems 6 and 7, you're going to have to implement this class from scratch. So you're going to have to create a class header. So I'm going to start out by writing out that class header. It should have the word class, the word tank ant, the name, and remember you have your inheriting class in parentheses. Remember this tank ant is going to be a container ant. So think about what class it would be beneficial for this ant to inherit from in order to make sure we minimize the amount of code we have to rewrite. Okay, so think about what we want to inherit, especially considering this is a container ant. And once we define that, you'll put that in here to represent that it's inheriting from that class. And then you're going to write in your class attributes. So you're going to give it the name class attribute, the implemented class attribute, and then any other class attributes, just like in question 6 and 7. So class attribute. Okay. And then once you do that, note for this question, all you're going to have to do is write code inside of this tank ant class. And remember, this is going to be a container ant, so it's actually going to depend on the code you wrote in the previous question, if you're writing this correctly, of course. So if you're finding that there's things you need to modify elsewhere, you should need to make sure that somehow this tank ant is taking logic from the container ant class. Okay, and then in the hint, it says the only methods you're going to need to override in the tank class are going to be init and action. So once you write your class attributes, the only other methods you're going to have to redefine here are the init methods. So init here, some arguments here, and some code here. And then you have your action method to override here with some arguments and then some code. And all you're going to need to do is with the init method, you just need to make sure that just like the class it inherits from, to initialize the ant. So you should just use whatever class you inherited from, the method of initializing the ant from there. The reason we need to override the init method though is because the initial health of a tank ant may differ. So we're going to use that initial health to kind of initialize the ants here. And you should look into inheritance and how we use parent class init methods to sort of initialize our ant. Once you do that, you're going to implement your action method. So again, this is a container ant. So it should perform the same action as the container ant, plus some additional extra features. So you should start out by using action method of parent class. So remember, just like any other container ant, this ant will allow the ant it contains to perform its own action. And that should be already implemented in the logic for question 8a. So when you wrote your container ant's action method, remember you already wrote the logic of having the contained ant perform its action. So you shouldn't have to rewrite that logic in question 9, as long as you performed inheritance correctly. So once you've correctly inherited that action method, you're going to make sure to do the extra little feature that a tank ant has, which is dealing 1 damage to all bees in its place each turn. So what that looks like is basically just go through all the bees in its place. And then you need to deal 1 damage. Remember that just like with fire ant, whenever you damage a bee, you need to also have the logic of having it possibly be removed from its place. But remember, there's already a method that handles this for us. So use the already implemented method to kind of reduce that bee's health by one and possibly remove it from its place. There should be a method you can call to deal with all of this logic just to reduce that bee's health. And that damage you deal, it should be one damage, but remember, the damage of an ant is something that you define as a class attribute. So if you look here with fire ant, you have your damage as a class attribute. So I recommend that instead of just using the literal value one as your damage, deal damage using class attribute. And remember, you can define that class attribute at the top, just like with the fire ant, except with a tank ant. And remember, the damage of a tank ant should be one. And once you do that, the entire tank ant should be implemented.